Hi. Hercules Posey was a ferryman, father, chef, and the property of George Washington. He was born into slavery in 1748 and was the property of John Posey, who was Washington's neighbor. John operated a ferry that crossed the Potomac, and Hercules was the ferryman. Washington hears rumors about Posey and calls in his mortgage loan and is given 26 slaves as payment, and Hercules was one of them. They are brought to Mount Vernon, which is Washington's plantation. Hercules apprenticed under the enslaved chefs Doll and Nathan and worked his way up until he made master chef. He marries Alice, a seamstress, who's owned by Martha Washington, and they live on the property. In the Mount Vernon census of 1786, his 3 children, Richmond, Eve, and Delia, are listed. Hercules is noted as one of 2 chefs of Mansion House. In 1790, 3 years after Alice dies, 8 enslaved Africans are brought to work in the presidential household in Philadelphia. Hercules is to run the kitchen, which he excels in. He becomes known for his culinary skills. He's even created a side hustle while traveling to the local markets to purchase food. He would sell leftovers and pocket the money. He was earning $200 per year, which was a lot of money, and dressed accordingly. He was a celebrated artiste of his craft and could really go anywhere he pleased. Less than 6 months later, the 8 were brought back to Virginia, and then they would return 6 months later. In 1780, Pennsylvania passed the Gradual Abolition Act, which freed all future children of the state's slaves. It also contends that no non-resident with slaves can reside here longer than 6 months, as the slave has the right to register as a Pennsylvania resident and claim freedom. Washington didn't want that. He wanted to retain control of his property for fear of losing it. On one of the trips back, Hercules finds out and insists he needn't worry about him. He was loyal. They allowed him to stay, but didn't fully trust him. On the way to Mount Vernon, Richmond is accused of stealing from a white servant. Washington is sure father and son are up to something and leaves Hercules behind and returns to Philadelphia. Hercules isn't allowed to work in the kitchen. He is made to do menial labor like digging clay for bricks. He carries on with all his duties quietly. And on February 22nd, while Washington was celebrating his 65th birthday in Philadelphia, in Virginia, it was also a holiday for the plantation. And Hercules self-emancipated, unseen by anyone. George wanted him found and brought back immediately. It turns out Hercules was smarter than anyone realized and remained elusive. Martha mourned the loss of her cook, and George had to buy another one, whose skills were by far inferior to Hercules. George never found Hercules, but freed him in his will upon the death of Martha. And upon his death, Martha freed his slaves in 1801. It's not sure if Hercules ever knew. It may not have mattered, as he was free. Records indicate that as of 1807, New York was his residence. He lived on William Street, which is now Baxter Street, in Chinatown. He worked as a laborer and cook and died in 1812 of consumption. He is buried in the 2nd African Burying Ground. There is no actual picture of him, but this is a depiction of what he might have looked like by artist Ronald Jackson. And I'll just leave that.